Hi and welcome to a new coding section in which we will see how we get assistance for Python development from GitHub Copilot. The requirements for this section are that you already have Python installed and you have at least some basic Python knowledge. In this section we will see how we can get assistance while building an interesting app, in my opinion, a password checker, and also we will see how we can generate tests for that application. We will do this with GitHub Copilot. We will also have a basic practice session for lists, and before finishing this intro for this section, let's review my own setup for VS Code for Python development to make sure that we are on the same line. So I will switch to my IDE. I'm currently inside my IDE. I have Python installed. If I will check right here, I have Python installed right here. I also have another Python version right here. There's no problem. But regarding Python extensions, I'm using inside VS Code the extension pack for Python. This is the one right here, the Python extension. Also I'm using Pylance, and as a linting tool I'm using the black formatter for Python. This is my Python VS Code setup. If you want it, you can also use it in the same way. Let's proceed into the next lecture and see the assistance that we get from GitHub Copilot for Python coding. Let's start this lecture by creating a simple Python file and see how GitHub Copilot gives us assistance. And as mentioned, I will work on a password checker functionality. So I will first create a new file. I will call this passwordchecker.py. And now we can simply start to write our implementation, but let's let GitHub Copilot do the work for us. But I will also start with my function name. So here I'll say def validate password. This receives a password, and now let's see what we get. Let's let GitHub Copilot think a little, and basically I think we are good to go. But I really want to have my own implementation of this function, so I will write the first condition myself. So here I'll say if the length of our password, so here I'll say if length of our password is smaller than 8 and the length is bigger than 20, all right, this is all right, we should return false. That's great. Let's now do a uppercase and lowercase container for this. So here I'll say, and I want to use iterators for this implementation. So maybe add a new line. Here I'll say if not any. All right, it wants to give me the digit contains. I will simply run this, accept this, we return false. All right, that's great. We want to also now check the lowercase and the uppercase implementations. And as you can see, as soon as I gave some basic context to GitHub Copilot, it now knows exactly the structure I'm expecting from my checks. And this is great. I will accept this implementation. All right, we are returning false. That's great. And now we want to also a lower check. That's great. We are returning false. And we will want to also make a special characters check. I can say if right here, or maybe let me just point GitHub Copilot to do things for me, since I'm not really know what to do. And let me add right here, add a special character check. All right, and this looks exactly how I wanted. I will accept this. And finally, if all these checks are done, I will simply return true inside this function. And yes, if the list of special characters is a little small for you, maybe you can simply point out to GitHub Copilot, with more words, maybe using the dialog, exactly what you want, and then it will give you exactly what you want. Well, this is one implementation of the function. Let's write another implementation of the function, but this time by returning meaningful messages. And from my experience with GitHub Copilot until now, I can't just say, hey, write a new variant or a new version of this function with this alteration. And it will not do that. I mean, it will do that, but it will replace my old function. I don't want that. So I will simply copy this function right here. I will create a new, let's just say a new function, def validate password with error messages. And I will select this and I will instruct GitHub Copilot, rewrite the function. I told it rewrite the function by raising the incorrect reason. Let's see if it understands what I want. Hopefully it does. And even if my spelling wasn't the best, it understood what I wanted. Instead of returning true or false, it will simply return or raise meaningful messages, you know, that contain the reason for the password not being valid. I will accept this, and as you can see, this looks like a GitHub diff view. I will accept this, and now we have a new version of this function. I will simply not return anything. Simply we want to validate this password. If nothing is, no error is thrown, then our function is alright. And as a last exercise inside this lecture, let's see how GitHub Copilot helps us with regular expressions. And I tell you, it is very powerful, and even if maybe for you are not so good with regular expressions, this is the case for me. I was never a master of regular expressions. I never liked them. GitHub Copilot is here for us. Let's write all this implementation with regular expressions. It will take a while for us just to do it by hand, but luckily we have GitHub Copilot. So I will simply create a new function. First of all, I don't want to lose this implementation. So I have a new function right here. I will call it validate password with error messages regex. Like this. I will save this and I will select this function, or maybe only its name. I will start GitHub Copilot inline chat right here, and I will say I told it rewrite this function using regular expressions. Let's see what we get. And first of all, it imported regular expressions, and then if we go downstairs, you'll see it will give us a nice implementation with regular expressions like this. I will accept this. The diff view is still not perfect from VS Code. As you can see here, we have no changes, but still we see it in blue. No problem. I will accept this. I will add a space right here, but if I will look lower down the line, you will see we have this new version of our function, this time with regular expressions. And this is great, you know, the support for regular expressions is great in GitHub Copilot. We saw how we can quickly write 3 versions of the same function very fast using GitHub Copilot. Let's proceed into the next lecture and see how we can rapidly generate messages or documentation with GitHub Copilot. In this lecture, we will see the assistance that we get from GitHub Copilot when we want to generate text or documentation inside our code files. And this is as simple as selecting our function, right-click Copilot, generate docs, like this. We will wait for a few moments and let's see if it understands what we need. Yes, it understood what we need, so I will accept this implementation. This documentation, we also see it right here. VS Code will show it as we hover over the function name. Let's proceed into the next section, into the next function, and see that if we get a meaningful documentation also here, since the implementation is slightly different. Yes, this time this function doesn't return true or false. It simply raises a value error if the password doesn't meet any of the above criteria. That's great. I really like this implementation. Let me just for fun see if, for example, I'm removing a special character right here. Let me remove this and see if now the documentation generated will be faithful. Let's say I will call generate docs, And yes, the documentation will also be faithful. It is really that smart. If I removed that special character, it was also removed from the documentation. I will accept this. And now, of course, I will also do the same for the other implementation. Copilot, generate docs. And now we have professional looking docs, even if it took a few seconds for us. Yes, this implementation is a little more minimal. I guess it has a hard time to really parse what's going on right here. I will accept this. Okay, it tells us with specific error messages. I'm really happy with this documentation. That's great. And one other point in which Copilot really shines, even if it's a small thing, is by generating meaningful commit messages. Usually when I'm typing, I'm coding a lot, I'm really only making meaningful commit messages on bigger commits or important commits, but most of the time I will use work in progress or stuff, you know, something just to commit this if it is in a working state. But with GitHub Copilot, I now have this symbol right here. This is a symbol for GitHub Copilot, and I will press this and it will generate a meaningful commit message for me. I will wait for a few moments. Alright, and it told us add password validation functions. Alright, that's great. Exactly what I wanted. I will commit and push these changes. Well, we saw in a few minutes inside this lecture how GitHub Copilot assists us at generating documentation and also meaningful commit messages. In this lecture, we will see the assistance that we get from GitHub Copilot for writing Python tests. And let's say that I'm new to Python testing and I don't know exactly what to use. And let me ask GitHub Copilot first of all. And I will ask it, what options do I have for testing Python files? And a few seconds have passed and GitHub Copilot returned to me with some really nice answers and also with some examples. As you can see, it tells me that I can use a unit test. It also gives me a meaningful starter file like this, or with PyTest or with doctest, and so on. From this point, it comes to personal preference, or you know, the tech lead preference. I will use unit test for this specific lecture and the following lectures because it is built into Python, so we don't have to import anything. And you know, GitHub Copilot is kind enough to also give me a simple testing starting point. So I will copy this, or better said, I will create my testing file and then I will insert it right there. So I will create a new file like this, and I will call this test underscore. It's test underscore password checker. And first of all, let's see if my testing setup works. So I will move to the chat and right here, click this insert add cursor like this. All right, this is my testing setup. I need a add function. Maybe let's see if GitHub Copilot will do this for us. Fix add is not defined. All right, please, thank you very much. No, this is not the case, so it's not smart enough to do it. No problem. I will simply, yes, add a implementation for this add function just to see if my test setup works. And now let's see, how do I run a PyTest or a unit test test? How do I? Alright, and it gave me the options. Alright, stop. Alright, please. Okay, it gave me the options. I can simply run it with Python test underscore password checker.py because I'm calling this unit test main right here. Let's see if this is working. So I will go to my terminal right here. I will open it and I will simply insert this into my terminal. Like this. This will simply copy and paste this command inside my terminal. Let's see if it works. And yes, everything is alright. I see this okay. I don't see any red things. This means that my minimal test setup is working. Let's now go to the next entry and let's see if we can get a minimal testing setup for our password checker function? Well, first of all, I will simply want to import this into my testing file. So right here, I will use from my password checker, import this password. Again, import this check password is validate password. All right. Let me import all of them. All right. You know, GitHub Copilot has this power to always know what you want after you have used it a while. All right. I have this class, so I don't need this testing setup anymore because I have my I know that my tests are working, and I can simply add right here a new definition, test password checker, or maybe test validate password, like this, validate password. And it is very good for GitHub Copilot to write the first test yourself, and this way it will know exactly what you want. So here I will say def test password length, password. All right, and right here that I want assert validate password. Yes, this looks all right. Let's see if this is working. So again, I will run this test. Yes, this test is working just fine. So this is great. This means that our testing setup works just fine. Let's proceed into the next lecture and finalize our tests. In this lecture, we will proceed to writing our tests, and from this point it should be okay. Let's start with this password length right here, and this first check only makes a check for the short value. Let's see if we getting a suggestion for a longer value. All right, I guess this is still wrong. Let's see, let me check this. This validate password should be invalid if the password is longer than 20. So maybe I want this a long string right here, so not like this, and this should be even longer like this. All right, let's see if the test is still passing. Yes, the test is still passing. We now want a check for the uppercase and the lowercase, and this will simply appear as we are typing. Currently it tells us that it wants to give us a suggestion for the password digit. I don't want this. I want test for uppercase and lowercase. So I will write them myself. Test password uppercase. All right, and now it knows like this. And yes, as you can see, the suggestions are still imperfect, you know. I mean, this is not the case. This validate password won't work with this kind of input, because this input doesn't specify the other suggestions or the other requirements of our password. This is the reason I really like this exercise with a password checker. You know, it really makes you think, and as you can see, you need to think more than GitHub Copilot. So yes, this is wrong. I won't use this. But the first suggestion was right. Let's see if the tests are still passing. Yes, they are passing. Now I want a uppercase, a lowercase check. All right, like this. All right, this is also okay. That's great. Now let's see if we are getting a suggestion for the digit or for the number. Let's say if yes. So we are getting a suggestion for the password number like this, no digit, and it should be all right. Also, we now want a check for the special character. Yes, that's great. This also looks all right, but I really don't like these suggestions because, for example, this implementation right here, this example right here doesn't have an uppercase, you know, an uppercase, so it might fall because it doesn't have an uppercase, you know, like here we don't have a number, or we don't have a special character, you know. Maybe we should also make the test stronger, you know, in this manner. Again, a limitation of GitHub Copilot. As you can see, it's not the answer to everything. Right here, I will also add a digit. I will also add an uppercase letter to make sure everything is all right. And let's see if we are getting a suggestion for a valid password. Let's see. Okay. Let's see if this is working. Yes, this should be okay. Let me run the tests. And yes, all the tests are running just fine. That's great. Let's now write tests for our other implementations, and let's see if GitHub Copilot is smart enough to understand that this is the structure of our code, and let's see if now it will be smart enough to also write meaningful tests. Now that it knows exactly, or it has an idea about what we want, let me just simply generate all the tests, not write everything before. For this, validate password with error messages. Let's see. So Copilot, I will call generate tests. And this will point me out that it will give me a refactor preview, and it will go into the test password checker. All right, let's see what we get right here. We get a new entry inside this class right here. This is not perfect. As you can see, it is inserting this somehow into the middle of the function like this. So, but it's still all right. Let me add, or let me apply this, and then I will fix them myself. You know, this is imperfect, but it's still, I will cut this because this is not the proper point to be present. All right, it added this 2 times, and now I will add this new class definition right here. And this implementation should be all right. Yes, we have a new class with which calls test validate password with error message, this one right here. And let's see if the generated tests are all right. All right, we have a failure. Let me pause the video and check it. All right, so the problem is that this example right here is a little too long. I will simply make it a little shorter, like this. And let's see if this is still working. All right, again some problem. And finally the tests are okay. We had some problems with this generated error code like this or like this. I removed the quotes and everything is all right. Our password checker also works just fine for this validate password with error messages implementation. Let's see in this lecture a few ways in which GitHub Copilot can give us assistance when working with lists. All right, for this I will create a new file. I will call this data.py, and let's get started. First of all, to have a sample data, let's create a class employee with a name, a age, and a salary. And I will instruct GitHub Copilot to do this, please. I told it to create a employee class with name, age, and salary. Let's see what we get. Exactly what we wanted. That's great. So we have now a simple data shape, let's say like this. Now I will create a employee list. So here I will say it will be a simple list. All right. Let's now append some data to this list, and GitHub Copilot already knows this is what I wanted to do. What the other solution would be? No, I simply want to generate some sample data for me to work with, and as you can see, GitHub Copilot will do this for me, so I won't be in the situation to always think of ways in which to generate some sample data for me to work with. So let's accept this suggestion and maybe some more. All right, enter tab, I want more. Let's see, even more. Let's see, even more. One more should be just fine. All right, and now we have some sample data for our employee list. Let's now see if we can write some functions that can work with this sample data. For example, I want a function that will return me all the names inside this list. Let's see if we can write it with the assistance of GitHub Copilot. I will say right here, get all, I called it get all employees names like this, and this looks all right. Let's see if this is working. So here I will say, I will call this to see if it is working, and let me execute this. Yes, it looks all right, so this means that our basic implementation works. Let's see if we can further on write our or more complex implementations. Maybe I want the maximum salary of this list, and here I'll say def get all right. get maximum salary, and VS Code and the GitHub Copilot already knew what I wanted. Let me check if this is working. So here I'll say print get maximum salary. All right, let me simply execute this. And yes, it returned me the maximum salary. This means that everything is all right. Let's see if it can do a little more complicated operation. Maybe we want the employees which have a salary bigger than. So here I'll say def get employees with salary bigger than, and now I want a argument right here. And basically we are good to go. Let's see if this is working. So here I'll say get employees with salary bigger than. This looks okay. And close the parentheses. All right. Again, let's simply execute this and things are looking all right. So in our case, Jeff and Bill have a salary bigger than 100,000. So this was basically a introduction to how GitHub Copilot assists us at working with lists. We can take things to the next level. We can even have some algorithms, some data structures right here. You know, the things that Python is very popular for. As you saw, we get a very nice assistance.